So I know the children are already pretty close up, but if you need to scoot over, or if you want to come, if any of the kids want to come up a little bit closer. Yeah, definitely. You can scoot in, we can fill in some space. There's space up here too. You can definitely sit on the floor. Great. All right. So the first Sunday of every month is the tradition at St. Matthew's to have our youth Sunday. We have our youth readers, they serve as ushers, play important roles in the service. And my hope is to really deepen that engagement with our youth and children in these first Sundays. And I'm working with a priest who's been developing living stories, a preaching curriculum that is inspired by Montessori and comic play, and it's to invite an intergenerational wonder. So while I think the children will be very familiar with what this style looks like, I really invite all of you into a space of wonder. You can get up and move if you need to see a little bit better. And when I ask wondering questions, everyone is invited to speak up and share. So I'm so glad that you're all close by. Can you see okay? So today we are celebrating All Saints. So we have a special reading. It's taken us out of our progression in Mark, and our reading today is from the Gospel of John, from chapter 11. And it's the famous story of the raising of Lazarus, Jesus' friend who has died. This story has traditionally been a precursor to the general resurrection, a time when all of those who have ever died will be brought back to life. So in today's story, we meet Lazarus, as well as his sisters, Mary and Martha, who are friends with Jesus. And there's many other people who have gathered around who miss Lazarus. When Mary arrived, she runs to where Jesus is. She sees him and she falls at his feet. And she says, "Lord, if you had been there, my brother wouldn't have died." And when Jesus saw her crying, and the other Jews who were with her crying as well, he was disturbed. And he asked them, "Where have you laid him?" Jesus began to cry, and the Jews said, "See how much he loved Lazarus." But others said, "He healed the eyes of the blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" They arrived at the tomb, and it was a cave, and a stone covered the entrance. And Jesus said, "Remove the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said, "Lord, the smell will be awful. He's been dead for 4 days." And Jesus replies, "Didn't I tell you that if you believe, you will see God's glory?" So they removed the stone. Jesus looked up and said, "Father, thank you for hearing me. I know you always hear me. I say this for the benefit of the crowd who is gathered, that they will believe that you sent me." Having said this, Jesus shouted with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out. His feet were bound, his hands were bound. Jesus said to them, untie him and let him go. The beginning of this story, we heard Mary say that Lazarus would not have died if Jesus had been there. I wonder, what was Mary's experience with Jesus that made him think he could prevent Lazarus from dying? She'd seen other miracles done. Yeah. She witnessed Jesus healing. No, right, she did not see anybody back to the dead. That's a big leap from healing the blind. But yet she still thought that. Well, she thought that he could prevent him from dying. But then she says, well, it was rather that she couldn't imagine that he could raise him from the dead. That thought doesn't occur to her. Nobody asks Jesus to do that. I wonder why they don't imagine that. It is, yeah, right. Like Jay said too, it's a bigger leap of faith.
Death feels so final.
I'm sorry.
Death feels so final.
Death feels very final. Yeah, absolutely. Death feels very final. I wonder how this relates to our experience with medicine today. How do we think about healing? Yeah, a lot of faith that it will make us better. Yeah, right. So engaging our spirituality through prayer, caring for yourself, but having community too. It's an interesting phrase that Jesus says, Lazarus, come out. This moment of calling Lazarus back to life is a powerful image for anyone who stepped into a new way of living themselves. I wonder what layers of meaning that phrase can have, that call to life can have for you. For me, it was an important recognition of being called to ministry. There's a new way of living that God was calling me to. Dang it, yeah, right. Have to be willing to pay attention. No, Lazarus had much choice, he said. But that's true, it can be hard to hear. Yeah, it can be very hard to hear.
I think we can get sort of bored with Christian life, and something happens that just keeps it along.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, thank you, Steve. So when we end up being in a kind of ho-hum spot about our faith and our Christian life, sometimes something will happen that, as Steve said, turns that on its head and calls us to actually step into a renewal of our commitment to the Christian life. All Saints is, of course, a day when we celebrate all of the saints who have come before us. I wonder what this story says to us in that context. Those who've been willing to embrace life being turned on its head. I can think of a few people in my life who exemplify that. Yeah, right. Maintaining faith throughout hardships, having that as a grounding point in their lives. The miracles can happen, absolutely. That bigger jump of faith is possible.
I think when you encounter a problem, you probably react basically one of two ways. It's seeking to stare in depression, or you can say, I get faith that this is going to, or I believe this is going to resolve itself. And the second one just brings a feeling of relief and peace that is a better way to react.
Yeah, so there's two ways that you can face hardships. One is a reactionary space, and another is a space of hope and faith. And the saints who really teach us to respond with faith and hope. Exemplifying that navigating challenges through that groundingness in faith, like you're saying, Carter.
I think a group of people praying for someone really makes a difference when the power of prayer all over the place.
Yeah.
I experienced that with my brother and through really bad hardship. But lots of people praying for her.
Absolutely.
And she's doing well.
Yeah, so the power of prayer and groups of people praying, recognizing that we are all saints who are praying on behalf of those that we know who are suffering. I wonder what the good news is in this story for you. Hope. Love. God can do big and small things. Yeah.
Power of community.
Power of community. Absolutely.
I also see Lazarus and Barnabas, that coming up to the presence of God and Christ when he came out of the tomb, and how that can be part of our lives.
Absolutely. Coming into a space of light in our own lives, leaving behind the darkness of the tomb. Yeah, beautiful.
I think that community was really way that the community, Bruce Martin said, you see what Jesus did at her words that were prompted with question, and if she had been there, what would happen?
Yeah. Yeah, Jesus responds to the community of faith. Every time it says that he sees them weeping, it's that he wept too, or he was deeply troubled. So that the community being together in that suffering is really important. And Jesus sees that and is present to that. Well, I pray that however the good news of Lazarus' resurrection resonates in your life, you'll notice that being called into the light